Hello everyone. It is Kenyon here. It is Basketball Rewind, and we are here today to talk about a new story. Today, the story is going to be covering the updated version of what is going on with the President of Basketball Operations search with MLSC. Of course, Masai was let go all not that long ago, and, well, his superior, Keith Pelly, announced that he was going to basically be backfilling the role, and they were going to go and do an extensive executive search through CAA. A lot of people think that Bobby could be one of the candidates, and they did announce that he is one of the candidates for the job, but I don't know if it's a done deal yet. There is a few articles that have come out, most recently one by Josh Lewenberg that I'm going to kind of cover here, and we can talk about it and see what does that mean for the fate of Bobby Webster in terms of his quest to become the new president of basketball operations. So let's get into it. So I'm going to leave a link in the description down below so that people who are interested can go through it and read it themselves. And I always want to credit the original source of information so that people understand that I am primarily just reporting what has been out there. Okay, so the story on TSN is called "Search for the New Raptors President is Underway, but the best candidate could be in-house." We'll see if we agree. So, Josh Lewenberg writes, "The Toronto Raptors are doing their best to convey business as usual, even if it's anything but. For the third straight summer, the team is working out in a hotel ballrooms turned into a state-of-the-art basketball facility. So everyone has kind of seen those open gym type situations and the social media photos where they take a portion of a Las Vegas ballroom, a conference room, and they basically convert it into a basketball court so that they don't have to drive out to different like UNLV or different places. They can just practice and live, breathe, and do everything and eat basketball stuff right by the court. It's right there, good to go. Okay. And so essentially that's something that they've done and they're continuing to do. They're approaching the halfway point of the tournament, and this is when this was written, which I believe was July 16th. So at the time of this, it was a couple days ago. But yeah, okay. Their attendance record is nearly perfect. I don't know if they mean by the attendance record the Raptors home attendance record or the attendance record for the Summer League, or if they mean what, but let's just assume that they mean the staff and everyone who's there. So everyone who's supposed to be there from a staffing standpoint is nearly perfect. Toronto's loaded Summer League has been practicing on one side of the court, one side of the gym, and then on the other side of this home, or I don't know if we want to call it a homemade gym, but this makeshift gym had a full contingent of its veteran players to train for on the other side. So most of the people. The team website lists about 80 people on its staff, from front office, personnel, coaching, trainers, chefs, etc., and most of these people made the trip to Vegas in the hopes of showing face, improving their worth, and sussing out like whatever comes next. I want a job in the next administration, essentially. And so this is important because there are some people that are going to stay in Toronto because their jobs are in Toronto, and everything they do, like say you're in charge of selling merchandise for the Real Sports apparel, you're not going to be traveling out there. You're going to be showing face in a different way. But the people that matter, all these other people, chefs and otherwise, are going to make their trip down to Vegas. They usually do, but yeah. And one of the reasons why they are trying to show face is because Keith Pelly was in Vegas watching and taking in the sights and scenes of Summer League again and again and again, which means that he's taking this seriously, and it could mean some other things like, looking at some different candidates. Okay, let's continue on. The elephant is in the room, and that is basically that Masai Ujiri is no longer here. No one is talking about their former boss or speaking his name out aloud. If you ask something about him on or off the record, you'll get a scripted response. He did great things. He will be missed. Life goes on. We've heard this type of response from Darko. Bobby hasn't really discussed it really at length, but largely that has been the key thing. I think Bobby spoke briefly at one point in Summer League, but it was really like, hey, yeah, did really good things. We're here focused moving forward. Okay, so request to make Bobby Webster and other people of the front office available for media has largely been declined. So again, when people have requested their presence for a potential interview or whatever, we're not speaking about it. So basically, even for stories that are unrelated to, so even if it's about CMB or whatever, the sense is that there's a code of silence, and that's a directive from the very top. And I'm assuming that that's a top, whether it be from Keith Pelly or also even Bobby Webster himself. And the nervous energy is palpable. So, yeah. Sorry, I'm outside, so yeah. Most people in the organization knew that change would be inevitable, with Ujiri going into the final year of his contract and Rodgers taking control of the MLSC. The timing the day after the draft hit them hard. 2 weeks later, the shock hasn't worn off. Now, to be fair, it sounds like between what Keith has said and just other things, even the look of how Masai looked the day that the draft lottery occurred, not the draft itself, but the lottery, you could see that there was disappointment in terms of how things would go out, and it does line up with Keith Pelly outlining the timeline of these discussions to go in a different direction. On one hand, in a highly competitive world of professional sports, it's not unusual for people to have doubts about job security, et cetera, and even by NBA standards, many people look over their shoulder, even if it was once notable. Given the longtime face of the franchise was just let go, and the face being not a player, but Masai Ujiri was in many ways the face of the franchise, and on top of that, you have a slightly new look ownership group that has promised more change across the board, across different sports. It's as he says, it's entirely justifiable. Everyone is scared, said a team source who asked to remain anonymous. So the closer you are to the top, the more you feel it. So that means that, like, if you're a trainer, hey, I'm just doing my job. I'm here working with, I forget the guy's name, but it's Jim, and he goes with Pirtle, and he used to work with Siakam and other guys. He just does his job. You ask me to go train a guy, I'm training the guy. I'm not really worried about my job. I'm not trying to move up in the world. I just want to be a trainer. Cool. But the closer you get to the top, the executive team, they feel it. Fortunately, the players are far enough removed and it shouldn't affect on-court product in a meaningful way. Now, this is something I want to get to after this next little bit. If there is anyone who should feel the pressure, it's Masai's top lieutenant, the general, calm, cool, collected, Bobby Webster, who was thrust into an unfamiliar position. Now, to me, the question is, the players aren't far removed from the top. I don't think that the players are feeling any sort of nervous energy or whatever. But in terms of, for example, looking back at Summer League, did they coach this Summer League roster in a way that they focused on winning over development and evaluation because Keith Pelly is there? That's a good question. And if it is the case, then it may have affected the players indirectly, even if the players themselves do what they're supposed to do. So I hope it's not the case, but it could be the case. Which is why this is an interesting article, and why in general you want these executive searches to not take the same equivalent time as us with our coaching search. The Hawaiian-born executive has worn many hats across basically almost his, 2 decades in the NBA, not for the Raptors, which accounts for half of his life. So he's about 40 years old. He has been the team's pseudo-accountant, using the expertise that he gained working in the league office, where he helped to craft the old CBA to manage the salary cap. Now, this new CBA, I don't know how much of a hand he had in writing it because he wasn't in the league office, but obviously things changed. So it could be the reason why he has not been as good at locking guys down financially and has given too much flexibility as a decision maker. But yeah, he's been a key negotiator in significant deals like the ones that brought Kawhi to Toronto and ultimately led the franchise, and it led the franchise to its first championship. He's scouted talent and been a crucial liaison. I don't know liaison, I'm assuming between talent and president of basketball operations. But yeah, the one thing that he hasn't done, and this is the interesting thing, is own the spotlight. Humble and unassuming by nature, Webster has seemed comfortable operating in Ujiri's shadow. That doesn't mean that he's incapable or unwilling to step out of it. Keith Pelly indicated that Webster would be considered for the vacancy, and by all accounts, the 41-year-old is very interested. Here's the thing. Do we know that it's humble in nature? It could be. But at the same time, it is sometimes over the years convenient when something goes bad. Who's stepping out and taking the blame for that? That's not always necessarily humble, but calculated. And also, to be frank, there have been years where he and Ujiri, in the past 3 years, definitely after trade deadlines, have given some sort of form of interview, whether it's on the Will Lose show or otherwise, in differing ways. And those messages have differed. And that's very interesting. So on one hand, Bobby might say, oh, there was a lot of, there was a lot of phone calls leading up. And then Ujiri will say, our phone wasn't ringing off the hook. There wasn't a lot of deals to be made, or vice versa. To say that it is his job may be a stretch. Pelly seemed to give off the impression that their preference was to bring in someone new and keep Webster in a GM role, in the GM role for the time being. That makes sense for league, that's a sense that league insiders have gotten as well. So it's not just, people on the inside, but people on the outside are getting the sense that they're leaning, they're going to consider Bobby, but they're also looking in other directions as well and getting a lay of the land, if you will. Could be why Keith Pelly is in Vegas as well. The search for the next Raptors president is officially underway. They enlisted CAA, executive search, and they believe that they're in the vetting process. But usually in these situations, you have to explain, it's almost like a PowerPoint or whatever, if you've in higher level job interviews, you have several different interviews. You go out for dinner sometimes you are given problems to solve, whether it's like a paper problem or not, scenarios that thought experiments that you have to think through, and sometimes you even have to present literally it's a pitch. This is why I am the right person for the job. And it's not just, hi, how are you? The basic job questions. It goes a little bit more in depth with that. So yeah, so they're in that process right now and asking many people. And they have a lot of intel on Bobby, so keep that in mind. Let's continue on. Pelly wouldn't put a hard timeline on the process, but it's fair to say that they'll probably have someone in place before September, before the start of the training camp, which, that makes sense, because at the end of the day, you don't want to go through like a half of a season. You don't want to be like how we were with coaching search, where it's like, okay, well, the draft is 2 weeks away. Are we going to have a coach? Because usually you would want the coach to have some sort of insight regarding your draft process. And yeah, there aren't many names floating around at the moment, but ones that, they're basically, he's speculating right here about, Bob Myers as an example. He said there's no indication that, Bob Myers would basically leave his gig. Fair enough. I like that he's saying, it was almost certainly too expensive for an organization who appears to be on a cost-cutting mission. Now, I think that he's saying cost-cutting mission aside from the Ujiri side of things, but mainly because I think there was a comment the other day on a hockey program that Keith Pelly outlined that they have 700 employees at MLSC, and in some ways these organizations do get bloated, where it's like, do you need 700 employees to do the work that maybe 500 employees could do? I'm not sure. I'm not that type of decision maker, but it is an interesting question. And I do think that ownership groups in general are looking to be more lean, but that doesn't mean that they want their decision. They're going to be chintzy or cheap with their decision makers. We will see. And there's other ways to be. If you're giving someone who is a businessman but knows a lot about basketball, but is maybe an agent stepping into this type of role, well, what that could lead to is someone who is cheaper than the $15 million a year that they were paying Ujiri, but someone who comes with the cachet to deal with players, etc., etc. So we will see. He mentions, and he goes on, a few plugged in folks to say that, yes, there's a recent trend towards Leon Rose, Justin Zanuck, and Rob Pelinka, basically these different guys that are agents, because agents do with their relationships are able to maneuver their clients to where they want to go. I know a lot of people talk about Rich Paul. I don't know if people talk about Leon Rose and the Knicks, right? So these situations are, Brunson's dad working for the Knicks as a coach. These are things that are not just isolated to one player or another. It happens a lot, quite a lot actually. So it's a level of soft power that these players wield, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it just is what it is. Okay, so we continue on. As if the situation wasn't precarious enough, imagine asking Webster to report to someone with less relevant experience. We don't know that, by the way, but I guess less relevant from the standpoint of within the Toronto Raptors organization. You're not going to put Dan Tolzman and consider him for the job over Bobby Webster. But yeah, imagine that happens. He was given a recent contract extension along with some other prominent members of his leadership team. But according to sources, those deals run through basically not this upcoming year, but essentially at the end of the following season, the 26-27 season. So it is essentially him and Darko's extension runs 2 more seasons, including the up and coming season. So essentially it's 1 more year after this. Hardly a long-term commitment or something that would preclude a new president from cleaning house or bringing in their own people. And that's the thing. If someone comes in, they might ask Bobby to clean up house, and then this is basically a trial year, as can you toe the party line kind of a thing. Letting Webster go, or worse, forcing him out the door, would be a mistake. He checks off a lot of crucial boxes, depending on how you feel about him, that would be considered prerequisites for Toronto. He's savvy, knows how to manage the cap, which has never been more important than with the new complexities of the CBA. He's got an eye for talent. He understands the market and what makes it unique, and this is a huge puff piece portion. Thank you, Josh Lewenberg. Clearly, this is a very pro Bobby article. Spoiler alert. He's learned from one of the best to ever do it, and all that being said, for his second in command, basically they're saying the same thing about Dan Tolzman. And unlike Ujiri, basically these guys are more affordable. So this whole portion is basically, hey, they should hire Bobby because A, he's cheap, and B, he is the perfect guy. Now, again, you might believe he is the perfect guy, you may not. My read on it is, if Bobby needs to outline in these meetings why he is different than Ujiri. They weren't happy with the direction that the team was taking under Ujiri, and if you're going to step into that new role and not just stay where you are, then you need to demonstrate how would you be different. And I know that they outlined the complexity of managing the cap and stuff. I don't know if we would say that this a roster, and we'll bring it up, that is the 9th or 10th most expensive roster in the league. So it's an upper third expensive roster while not being a top third roster from a wins perspective, and hasn't been for a couple years. It's hard to agree with the point that Josh Lewenberg just made here. But I digress. And this is why I say, like, I don't know if it's just about the cheapness, but fair enough. Let's continue on. What would a Webster-led front office look like? We don't know. Nobody does. And yet we're making a huge article about it, saying that it would be just the thing that we need. But hey, nobody does. His fingerprints are all over every move the Raptors have made since Ujiri hired him in 2013 and then promoted him to GM in 2017. He hasn't had full autonomy or final say on any of these moves per se. Ujiri was often deferred to and empowered and championed his people. This is very true, actually. It was very much a all hands on deck and a very at some points cohesive organization that Ujiri built it, which is good. You want to empower the people below you that you trust to do their job really well. And there was never any doubt as to who is in charge until I think more lately in terms of what I talked about before. But yeah, Webster isn't Ujiri though. But that may end up being more of a feature than a bug. He doesn't bring the same larger-than-life personality or gravitas, qualities that Raptor fans generally looked for in their sports executive. Also, one thing that Keith Pelly outlined that is important for the next person is that type of ability to command the room. But he's looked at as down-to-earth as it gets in this business and at that position specifically. He has a more understated leadership style and a different way of communicating. While some executives were more intimidated and sometimes off-put, this is very interesting choice of words, off-put by Ujiri, it's hard to say that anyone is saying that we won't deal with Bobby Webster. He's a bit of a chameleon that can dress down, basically that can dress down and have casual conversations. I don't like this actually. While fitting in with and commanding respect from his front office peers. Are they basically saying that he's in the fit in crowd? This seems like really kind of starting to throw Ujiri under the bus. And near the end, I was not a fan of Ujiri's moves, but I think that this is I wouldn't say a hit piece, right? But it's not very flattering, and I also disagree. I mean, I didn't see anything wrong with Ujiri's. I can't speak to his style in terms of negotiations, but I don't like this. Where was it? Right here. Like people were intimidated or off-put by Ujiri, or that. Okay, this is clearly. Again, this seems to be a piece that is coming from a Bobby Webster camp, trying to say, I'm not like Masai. Please hire me. Don't make me update my LinkedIn. Anyways, the biggest question of whether or not he can hold an audience in the MLSC boardroom, an arena which Ujiri always felt comfortable, and sell the suits on a trade, signing, or crucially himself. And that is going to be the question, because if you can't command the room, that room specifically, especially, most importantly. Now, sorry, this is a little bit longer, but I thought it was a fun article to kind of go through. As for what Webster, like the Webster team might look like, he's simply, many will assume that he will simply adopt Ujiri's vision, and I've heard this in the ethos of Raptors land, where people have suggested, they should just keep Bobby Webster because they want to see a continuation of the Masai vision, whatever it is that they feel like is Masai's vision. I don't know what Masai's vision was, but yeah. But again, I think that if you're Bobby Webster, you want to have your own vision, and that's clear from this article that is being communicated from someone in MLSC through Josh Lewenberg, that they want, there needs to be a shift. So Yeah, basically, a lot of people are saying that he will, but like his predecessor, he's known to value long, versatile defensive players, as far as we know. As his ninth overall selection last month, the one that a lot of people are kind of not really owning this pick, but yeah, Colin Murray Boyles would indicate with the positionless nature of the NBA right now. He said when he made the selection of the fourth overall pick, obviously Scotty Barnes. We see it as, let's have 5 guys that look like him, OG, and Pascal. However, the idea that he is simply a disciple of Ujiri is a misconception. Just because 2 people work together closely for a long period of time doesn't mean that they share the same tendency. A recent example is Nick Nurse worked under Dwayne Casey in Toronto for 5 seasons before the former replaced the latter as head coach. As it turned out, couldn't have been a more different approach, philosophy, personality, for better and for worse. Okay. One other thing that I think is really, really interesting, and then I'll read basically to here, and for the rest, people can obviously click and check that out. But let's continue on and finish up real quick. Okay. According to multiple sources, Ujiri was the driving force behind the Brandon Ingram deal last February, while others in the room were less convinced about the fit and the timing. Just to assume that Bobby would pick up where Ujiri left off might be a bit misguided. I guess he didn't add the bit, that was me, but yeah. They could use a fresh perspective after missing the playoffs for 4 out of the last 5 seasons. They don't necessarily need to look outside of the organization for that. The grass isn't always greener. That is very interesting. That's very interesting. Very, very interesting. The way that ended on that sentence and all that tells me that this is coming from a Bobby Webster camp. So that's probably the first thing, the most important thing, that this is a message that's disseminating from Bobby Webster. There's also a message from Bobby Webster. I will read one other line without going and pulling it up on screen, but it says, this is where it ends. It says, but leaving them in limbo for an indefinite period isn't a sustainable strategy, nor is it a humane one. At some point, something's got to give. Now, when you're saying that, you're trying to do one of 2 things, and I'm just going to focus on one of those things. And one of those things is forcing someone's hand. It doesn't seem like this is, when you're talking about a humane thing, which might or might not be fair. To be fair, these are, they may not be making 15 million, but they are paid well enough. They're not poor people. And I'm not trying to make this a class, class type thing, but to act like it's being inhumane when sometimes they've done, front office members do this to players, I think is very interesting. What I will say is this. This is not an article that comes from a party that is comfortable with their position in terms of getting a job. So, my read on the situation, based on this article and some other recent articles about the pick in terms of Malawatch versus this versus who wanted that and who's owning whatever decision that was made in the past, is I don't think Bobby's fully comfortable with his position in terms of this president of basketball operations search. And it also seems like, again, though he has a bit of an extension, he may not be the most comfortable moving forward in terms of his position moving forward under someone else, where he isn't given a chance to run a team from the very top. Could I be wrong? It's possible, but that's my read. This is the article. I'll leave it below in the description. Like, comment, and subscribe if you have not subscribed. And yeah, if you want more of these types of things, whether it's Raptors or otherwise, we're probably going to be covering Terry Rozier pretty soon, because that situation, more stuff is coming out. We covered Malik Beasley, and we're going to cover some other things just as they come out, whether it's Raptors or otherwise. Yeah, this is Basketball Rewind. Stay well, and also stay hydrated because it is summer and it is quite warm, although today is going to be a little cooler. All right, take care, people, and peace.